In this video, I want to explain how to translate sentences containing the words if, only if, or if and only if. These three expressions mean three different things, and we have to pay attention to how we symbolize them in propositional logic. Let's start with if. So an if statement I'm defining as whatever simple statement follows the word if in an English sentence. And your basic rule here is that an if statement goes on the left side of the arrow or horseshoe when you symbolize a conditional statement. It goes on the left side. In other words, it's the antecedent in the symbolized conditional. So here's an example. Okay, if you get this English sentence, if unicorns fly, then pixie dust is delicious. Now your if statement is the thing that's underlined. Unicorns fly. That's the simple statement that follows the if. Okay. So when we symbolize this, we've got two simple statements in this conditional. Unicorns fly, that'll be P, and Q will be pixie dust is delicious. So, if you just symbolize the statements, you get if P, then Q. So when we fully symbolize it, the P is the if statement. It's going to be on the left side of that arrow. If P, then Q, just like that. P arrow Q. Now the same thing is true even if that if statement comes after the then statement in an English sentence. So oftentimes English sentences are like this, where the if, the antecedent, comes after the consequent in the English sentence. So for example, pixie dust is delicious if unicorns fly. That means the exact same thing as saying if unicorns fly, then pixie dust is delicious. So again, you'd symbolize it the exact same way. Even though what you've got here is Q if P, you still put P arrow Q because P is the if statement. It's going to be the antecedent in that conditional. Now, let's shift from if to only if. Only if means something quite different. If gives you sufficient conditions for another statement. Only if gives you necessary conditions for another statement. So an only if statement, I'm defining as the simple statement that follows an only if in an English sentence. And an only if statement goes on the right side of the arrow or horseshoe. In other words, it's going to be the consequent when you symbolize that English statement. So here's an example. Pixie dust is delicious only if unicorns fly. Now in this case, the only if statement is unicorns fly. Okay, so if we symbolize the simple statements in the same way, then what we've got here is Q only if P. And because P is the only if statement, we're going to put Q arrow P. Q arrow P. Now remember, just by way of contrast, if you have Q if P, then it's P arrow Q. If you have Q only if P, then it's Q arrow P. It's the opposite. All right. Now, what if you put those two together? If and only if. What do you if you have an if and only if statement? That is a statement which follows if and only if in an English sentence. Well, in that case, an if and only if statement goes on either side of a biconditional symbol. That's a triple bar or an arrow pointing in both directions. So for example, if you have unicorns fly if and only if pixie dust is delicious, well then what you've got here is P bar Q. P if and only if Q you symbolize as P triple bar Q, or P arrow in both directions Q. This is really one arrow. I just don't know how to, on a PowerPoint, I don't know how to join the arrows together. Okay, so if is different than only if. and they're both different than the combination, if and only if. Here's a summary of your 3 rules for symbolizing these kinds of statements. 3 rules. An if statement goes on the left side of the arrow. An only if statement goes on the right side of the arrow. An if and only if statement goes on either side of a biconditional or a triple bar. Okay. Here's a chart that walks you through all of it. So here's the if statement. If unicorns fly, then pixie dust is delicious. In other words, if P, then Q. You symbolize that as P arrow Q. Even if the English sentence, the if comes after the then clause, it goes the same way. If you have Q if P, you still symbolize that as P arrow Q. Now, only if is different. If you have Q only if P, then that's going to be Q arrow P. And if you have Q if and only if P, then it's going to be Q triple bar P. And that's logically equivalent, by the way, to saying P triple bar Q, right? Because the arrow is pointing in both directions, it doesn't technically matter which side you put the Q and P on when you have an if and only if. In these, it makes all the difference in the world, but with the if and only if, they're logically equivalent. So no matter which way the English sentence goes or this part goes, it's Q triple bar P. All right, that's the short story. Now you get your conditional statements all straightened out.